Life of Pi by novelist Jan Martel is a tale of Pisin Molitor Patel, known as Pi. It is a story within a story. The frame of the novel involves the true narrator, the author, a novelist who, while living in India, is told an incredible story. The first small section introduces the idea of the book and also solidifies the first part of the novel's frame. Its first-person narrator is a novelist who is trying to escape the failure of his second published novel and his second failure to produce a third novel at all. A Canadian who has traveled to Mumbai, India to work on a book about Portugal. He has a conversation with Francis Adi Robasame, who promises to connect him with the man Pai Patel, who has a story that will make him believe in God. The author takes the bait and meets with Pai in Toronto, Canada. The author then briefly describes the experience of meeting Pai and being told Pai's amazing story, as well as his decision to write it as a novel. He outlines how he decided what kind of style and point of view to use and expresses great affection. Pai Patel's real name is Pisin Molitor Patel, but because Pisin sounds like pissing and he was teased and humiliated at school, he changed his name to Pai. Pai speaks at great length about the relationship between humans and animals. Pai's father feeds a goat to a tiger to illustrate how completely wild the zoo animals truly are, and that they are not to be thought of as pets or people, but the most dangerous animals Pai's fathers believe are humans. The existence, moralities, reality, and consequences of zoo are discussed at length. Pai's experience informed his dual majors of religious studies and zoology. Pai is mentored by two men with the same name, Satish Kumar, a biology teacher who is an atheist and a communist. His influence on Pai is not insignificant, and for Pai cements a relationship between science and faith, which are usually thought of as diametrically opposed ways of thinking. As Pai comes of age, he discovers spirituality. His first religion is Hinduism because of his natural love of its spirituality and beauty. Later, he finds himself in a Catholic church where he falls in love with the story of Christ, and even later he becomes a Muslim. After the second, Mr. Satish Kumar explains to Pai that it is a religion of the beloved. Pai's simultaneous belief in three religions meets with skepticism and outrage from the religious leaders of his community and puzzlement from his family. One day, he is the center of confrontation in the marketplace, involving his family and all the religious leaders and mentors he has been worshiping with and learning from. None of the religious leaders believe Pai can follow all three religions at the same time, and eventually he is chased away from the temples, churches, and mosques. His family, however, apparently accepts his threefold belief. They casually humor his religious needs and interest. His father has no interest in religion, and although his mother has been brought up in both the Hindu and Baptist faiths, she also claims no religious interest and practice. Pai, his family, and most of the animals from the zoo board the Chimsum as shipped heading to Canada. The family has arranged the sale of the most of the animals at the zoo in North America, and they intend to start a new life in Canada. One night, in the middle of the ocean, a massive storm threatens the ship. Pai goes on deck to see what is happening. fearful to the storm. Pi approaches a group of crew members, expecting assistance in saving his family, or at the least advice on what he should do next. Pi is incredibly surprised when crew members threw him overboard with a life jacket into a lifeboat. Pi sees animals droning all around him and instinctively begins to rescue Richard Parker, though he does realize what a suicidal move this truly is. Pi watches the ship sink, sure that he will never know what caused the disaster. However, he does come to realize that the crew members did not throw him overboard to save him. Rather, they were trying to protect themselves, hoping Pi would distract the wild animals in the water if the crew themselves needed to abandon ship. Essentially, Pi was used as fodder. As morning and calm return, Pi is greeted with the arrival of Orange Juice, a large orangutan. She appears floating on a nest of bananas, covered in black spiders. Pi welcomes her aboard the small lifeboat that he is knowingly sharing with a hyena and a wounded zebra. The tiger is hiding beneath the tarp that covers half of the lifeboat. Pi feels great affection for Orange Juice, fear of and revulsion for the hyena, and vague pity for the dying zebra. He hopes that the hyena will be more interested in eating Orange Juice and the zebra than him, as they are more familiar prey. The hyena does, indeed, consume both animals. It first eats the zebra alive, which is a horrific and lengthy process. Pi discusses the nature of hyenas in detail, specifically how they are capable of cannibalism and drinking urine. Pi has some hope that Orange Juice will be able to fight off the hyena. And though she does initially hit the hyena very hard and defend herself well, the hyena eventually takes her down and consumes her also. And suddenly, the tiger makes himself known, appearing from under the tarp and killing the hyena. Pi takes a break from the immediate narrative to explain how Richard Parker's name resulted from a clerical error that mixed up the name of the tiger's captor with the name of the captive animal itself. Richard Parker's original name was Thirsty, because he was caught with his mother at a watering hole. Pi and Richard Parker survived together for 227 days. Following the death of the other animals, Pi starts taking stock of what is in the lifeboat and using what he finds. He identifies thirst as his greatest danger. Drinkable water is his and Richard Parker's greatest priority. Able to sustain himself temporarily on the lifeboat supplies, he realizes that he must ration and plan for beyond his immediate needs. He also slowly transitions from a devoted vegetarian to a hunter and a carnivore. He at first laments that the lifeboat food supplies contain animal fats, but he eventually begins killing, butchering, and eating sea turtles and fish without any thought. Pi also confronts the reality of trying to survive while sharing the lifeboat with Richard Parker. After carefully reviewing his options, he concludes that he will have to keep the animal alive. Only by caring for the tiger can Pi protect himself from being killed and eaten by him. All of Pi's efforts then become focused on finding a way not just for himself to eat, drink, and sleep, but for Richard Parker to do so as well. In his first step toward this goal, Pi uses the lifeboat's oars and life jackets to construct a raft that he tethers to the lifeboat and begins to inhabit, putting him out of the immediate reach of Richard Parker, who remains on the lifeboat. Pi conceives a plan to train Richard Parker, both for his own protection from the tiger and to mark the territory that is his, not Richard Parker's. He maps out a training method in a list of steps, all of which hinge on using Richard Parker's own seasickness and an orange whistle Pi finds in the lifeboat. Pi employs them both in a form of aversion therapy by rocking the lifeboat to make the tiger seasick while blowing the whistle. Over time, the tiger begins to associate just the sound of the whistle with his seasickness, allowing Pi to maintain his own territory and, if necessary, protect himself from Richard Parker by just blowing the whistle. The two weather a giant storm that destroys Pi's raft of oars and life jackets. They both become residents of the lifeboat, with Pi maintaining his territory. One day, a freighter passes nearby, and Pi, hoping to be rescued, launches a flare into the sky. It goes unseen, though, and the freighter passes on, upset at not being rescued, but is somewhat comforted by Richard Parker's apparent indifference. First, Richard Parker and then Pi go temporarily blind. The cause is not clear, but the result is that madness begins creeping in for Pi. No longer able to see, Pi has a long conversation with an unknown companion about their desire for food. Pi speaks at length about his longing for figs, potatoes, cabbage, spicy lentils, and stuffed eggplant. The other voice craves food too, but wants to substitute things like the pancreas and brain for some of Pi's main ingredients. Pi is at first outraged by the idea of eating flesh and eventually asks if there is anything that his embodied voice won't eat. When the voice replies that a carrot is something completely inedible, Pi realizes that he has been talking with Richard Parker. He is relieved that he hasn't gone mad but is puzzled by the animal's French accent. Pi then hears another voice. It is a Frenchman on another lifeboat who has also lost his sight, both clinging to life and sanity. He and Pi tell each other nonsensical stories about bananas and discuss their survival methods. Pi is overjoyed to have a human companion and invites the Frenchman onto the lifeboat, calling him brother. As the man boards Pi's lifeboat, he sits on Pi to kill and eat him. At the last minute, the man is killed by Richard Parker. Pi regains his eyesight and observes the carnage. He is disturbed, but practical. He eats some of the flesh and uses a severed arm for fishing, but ends his account of the episode by declaring that he prays for the man every day. Pi and Richard Parker come to an island populated only by meerkats. At first, Pie remains close to shore and sleeps in the trees, while Richard Parker spends nights in the lifeboat. Eating algae and other sweet plants, Pie slowly regains his strength and his ability to walk. Richard Parker, on the other hand, disappears into the foliage every day and comes back to the lifeboat, reinvigorated. The mystery of Richard Parker's journey into the island's interior is solved when Pie finally has the strength to explore the islands and discover its incredible population of meerkats. Vulnerable but, up until now, without any natural predators. Richard Parker eats his fill every day, and Pie is able to revert back to his vegetarian ways with great satisfaction. However, in time Pie makes the disturbing discovery that the island itself is actually a predator. At night, the ground becomes charged and lethal, killing and consuming anything on or below its surface. Pie arrives at this conclusion when pulling back the layers of what he thinks is a piece of fruit. He finds a human thought. He decides that he must leave the island and will take Richard Parker. Pie and Richard Parker continue their journey and land in Mexico. Pie is incredibly weak and sick. Richard Parker runs into the jungle without turning back to look at Pie. Pie gives himself the challenge of telling his story in exactly 100 chapters and expresses disdain from his name, Pie, a number that never ends. Pie is rescued by local people who bathe, feed, and clothe him. After Pie's rescue, Mr. Tomohiro Okamoto and his junior colleague, Mr. Atsuro Chiba, both of the Maritime Department in the Japanese Ministry of Transport, visit Pie and interview him for the record, in part because they are trying to find an explanation for the sinking of the Chimpson. The two officials are very skeptical of Pie's entire story and try to refute it by questioning simple details such as whether or not bananas float. Pie becomes frustrated with the two men and yells at them, saying that they are incredibly ignorant of how many animals escape and are lost from zoo all the time. The three men finally come to an understanding when the two interviewers explain that they simply need a second story, something more believable. Pie supplies this alternative version of his journey, that aboard the lifeboat with him were his mother, the Frenchman cook from the ship, and a crewman. The crewman had a badly broken leg and the cook insisted on amputating it, gaining the cooperation of both Pie and Pie's mother. After the amputation, the crewman died a slow and painful death. Then, the cook revealed that the only reason he amputated the leg was to use it for bait. Pie's mother, outraged and sickened by the act, railed against the cook, especially when he began to eat the crewman, which Pie insists neither he nor his mother took part in. Pie's mother and the cook quarreled, but they eventually became relatively civil shipmates. The turning point came when a turtle escaped capture and the cook hit Pie. Pie's mother then became violent towards the cook and directed Pie to leave the lifeboat for a raft that was tethered to the lifeboat. Pie watched as the cook decapitated his mother and threw the severed head to Pie on the raft. In the end, Pie starved the cook to death. The officials observe that Pie's first story is much like his second, only with animals. The zebra is the crewman, the hyena is the French cook, orange juice is Pie's mother, and the tiger is Pie himself. The two men decide, and are advised by Pie, that there is no way to tell which story is true, that they will have to take Pie's word for it. And that is the end of the story.